Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Darkstone Dossiers with your host, Anthony Darkstone.
Greetings and welcome everybody to the Darkstone Dossiers. I'm thrilled to be able to do this and want to extend my thanks. We do a couple of shows that we're involved in on behalf of the SAM, and this is our very first. And we have, as you've probably gathered already, a wonderful gentleman, is a dear, long, old-time friend from Houston, Texas, who is our main guest. But before we get to that, for those of you who don't know him, I would very much like to take this opportunity to welcome our incoming Society of American Magicians next president. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Joel Zaritsky.
Glad to be here there too. And Anthony, thanks for having me on today.
Well, you're welcome. You're on every day except that you're hidden because you're the man who takes care of all the hard work behind the scenes with Zoom. So without you, nothing is possible. Now that you've met Joel, I think really what we need to do is to turn the floor, the stage, the cabaret room, whatever you want to call it, to a very, very dear gentleman who I absolutely love, and I'm not alone in that. There are many, many who love him in Texas and indeed around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bill Merlin Palmer.
Hi there. Good to see all of you. Well, I can't really see you. I hope you can see me. Many of you already know that I am the curator of the Cups and Balls Museum, which is the world's largest collection of cups and balls. There are nearly 2,000 sets of cups. Now, I can't take you up into the museum itself because right now it looks like a disaster zone. But I did bring down some of my favorite cups just so you could get an idea of the history of the trick and what went into it and what's going into it. Now, I'm going to show you something that's very unusual. Now, those of you who are scholars of the cups and balls will know that the Romans referred to cups and balls workers as acetabularii. It came from the vinegar cup, which was actually a unit of measurement in addition to being a cup. I actually was able to purchase an acetabulum. This is what it looks like. It might be hard to see with the reflections there. There, you can see it now. It's just a kind of a dished cup. It holds about 2 or 3 ounces of liquid, and it's supposed to be an actual measurement. Perhaps this ridge had something to do with being able to measure it, but I could see how that could be used for something similar to a 3-shell game. But this is not the oldest cup in the collection. Older than that, that cup was roughly 0 AD. This cup is from the ancient land of Elam, which is partially in Persia, around Iraq or Iran. This is about 4,000 years old. And this one here is also from Elam, and it is about the same age, just slightly different styles. They did not have a potter's wheel then. They made these things with coils of clay, which they stacked up on top of each other, and then they thinned them out fairly well, and then they baked them and made very simple earthenware pots. I decided I really knew what he was doing, so that gives you an idea of what the early cups they had to work with. Now, I don't know if they ever did the cups and balls with these, but this gives you an idea of what the cups were at those early time periods. Fast forwarding to nearly the present, we come to a book that was extremely important to magicians. It was called Hocus Pocus Jr., or The Whole Art of Legerdemain in Perfection, published in 1634, written by somebody who people think might have been the original Hocus Pocus. Hard to say. In this book, he describes these cups, and he says you need 3 cups made of brass or tin plate that are all the same size and that have the bottom inlet just a little bit so there's a place for the ball to stay on top of them. Bob Reed told me once that he thinks this is the first description of a purpose-made cups and balls set. Now that is historically important. So these were made very recently in Pakistan, and I have them in, I had them in several different sizes. Now I'm just down to one of these, a little bit larger one and a huge one. But this would be similar to the cups you'd find in a tavern in England in roughly 1634. That's what the guys in the taverns worked with. Now, why was that important? Well, you had to go where people had money, because the cups and balls actually was kind of pretty much a gambling game. It wasn't clean children's recreation like we think of it nowadays. You had to have a place where people had money flowing and were probably drinking, so they turned loose of it. So you use something you'd find in a bar. Now, this does not have a shoulder bead on it. That shoulder bead is important. You see, this is a set of cups that, for all of my friends from the Magic Circle, these belonged to Ali Bongo. His real name was William Wallace. Turns out that Bongo and I are very distant cousins. You see this lump here? That's called a shoulder bead. This is the mouth bead. That's the shoulder bead. And the distance between the mouth bead and the shoulder bead is the same as the distance between the top of this cup and the bottom of the inside if it's not too thick. That means that you can put a ball that is less than that diameter right here on top, and they'll nest. Miracles. Well, these didn't have that. You had to be careful not to jam them together or you'd get things stuck. So the invention of the shoulder bead was a very important thing. Bob traced it down to a painting that was done in the late 1700s. Before that, no shoulder beads. So that was one of the important decisions that cup makers had.
Before you put those away, Bill, just a quick question for those watching, and indeed for myself and those who may well watch the tape version. Those cups you just mentioned belonged to dear Ali Bongo, is that right?
Ali Bongo, that's correct.
Yeah. How did you acquire them? Did you steal them?
No, I wish I had. No, I didn't actually. I got them at one of the Potter auctions. In fact, I got maybe a third to half of my better cups at the Potter auctions. And I'll mention that's important to me because all of this stuff is going to be going to Chicago very shortly. This particular set of cups is very important to me because I've had this set of cups since I was in high school, and that was a long, long time ago. We're going to have our 60th reunion this year. So I've had these cups actually probably 64, 65 years. These are Tannen's stubby cups. They didn't make many of these. They were not very popular because they were kind of big. But the thing that was good about the Tannen's stubby cups is they would take a tennis ball without any difficulty as the final load. Now this is a P&L cup. They're good cups. In fact, this particular set of cups has an engraving on the side that says John Platt, Master of the Cups and Balls. These cups were given to John as an award. I have the other two that go with it. I have several pieces of John Platt material. But look at this. That's a pretty good fit, isn't it? I could put anything that you put in a P&L cup inside this one and more. So I had a set of P&L cups, so I just got rid of them because, hey, I wanted these big cups. Never did learn how to use them. Shortly after that, I discovered my true calling when it came to the cups and balls, and that was the chop cup. The reason I liked the chop cup is the same reason that Don Allen liked it. You got right to the ending real quick. The thing was just a great thing for me. This particular cup I acquired in 1967 or 68, so I've had it quite a while. And it was given to me by a friend who wanted to be a magician so badly that he would do anything for it. He was never had a chance because he was just naturally clumsy. He couldn't do anything. So I inherited all the stuff that he was going to throw away, and that among them was this cup. Now, this cup was one that I used for ages. I learned how to do loads with this cup. At the time I was playing the banjo and the accordion at the Shakey's Pizza Parlor on Westheimer Road. I would do magic at the tables between sets. So I was looking for a good final load for this cup. And then I realized that it was the same shape as our plastic salt shakers that Morton had provided to us. The salt and pepper shaker. And it would hold one of them just perfectly. So I learned how to load one of those in there, and of course, being a leather cup, it wouldn't talk when you loaded it. So I used that. Later on, when I was working at the Renaissance Festival, I found that I could load 3 billiard balls into this cup. Now these are not actually billiard balls, they're snooker balls, which are a little bit smaller. Full-size billiard ball is 2 1/4 inches. This is 2 1/8. That's okay, because here's the nice part. You can hold the cup up here. You can hold it up here with the load in it and release the pressure on it and fall out. So at the end of the routine, I would do 3 loads, pick the cup up, and I go another ball. Okay, and I'd roll the ball in here, and I'd say, when you see a ball like that, you have to realize that I have an extra ball. It's a billiard ball. And I go, of course, the kid that's standing next to me blinks, and I say, when you see a billiard ball like that, take a cue from me. Cue ball, billiard ball, a little over your head, isn't it? Well, it doesn't matter. You've been behind the 8 ball for this whole thing. And that was the ending of the routine. And it worked very nicely. It got a real big round of applause. And I was doing this for 1,200 people. So you think about a ball this large and 3 billiard balls and a little leather cup entertaining 1,200 people, 400 of whom were standing. So that was okay. I learned a lot about holding a crowd when I was working the Renaissance Festival. And it's good information that I do share with people when the time comes. I'll pass some things along to you as we do this. If you're new to cups and balls and you want to do a routine, the place to start is with your final loads. You figure out what you're going to put into the cups at the end of the trick to wow your audience. And that's where you start. You pick a cup that'll hold them. And then you figure out how to get them in there without making any noise. The leather cup was a great idea. It just happened that I had one. But then the next most important thing is the color of the balls. The reason that's important is that if you can't see the balls on the top of the table or against the backdrop, which is your jacket, they're not going to see them. All of the things you make those balls do are just going to be wasted breath. Something that you can see. Yellow shows up on black better than any other color. White shows up second best. That's what I use most of the time. Now there are some interesting misconceptions about cups. A lot of people call this an Indian cup. It really isn't. This is not an Indian cup. It looks like an Indian cup. This was actually one of Johnny Platt's cups, and Johnny did a really nice pseudo-Indian cup routine. It was based on what they actually did in India. But Johnny worked most of the time off a table, so he couldn't do a real Indian cup routine because that was done seated. Now you think, well, why is that important? It's because the Indians knew more ways of concealing a ball than we do. Now this is an actual Indian cup. It was made in India. It's made from a coconut shell that's been polished, and it even came with a matching coconut wand. The Indian routine that people seldom get to see, but it's the original one, is called Chepum Pantum. And there's only one person in the United States who knows how to do it. His name is Gary Koznitsky. And here's the thing about the cups. One of the most important parts of it is displaying the ball on top of the cup. It's important because they do some instant palming like that as they're passing over the cup. And if you can't rest the ball on top of it, you can't do it. And the other thing is when they actually sometimes use a method of palming with their feet. That sounds kind of difficult. It isn't. The most often emulated cup in the world, this is a Paul Fox cup. This one is kind of special because this cup was actually one that Paul Fox himself used. Now, Paul was a jeweler who worked for Tiffany's. He was an engraver. And his daughter Margaret auctioned off a bunch of his stuff at the same time that some of Vernon's things came up for auction. Well, they look a little different from any of the Paul Fox cups I've seen. And they definitely look different to me. Then when I got them, I noticed the differences. And I'm going to show them to you. You may have a little trouble seeing this. This is a set of cups that were made by Danny Dew. The thing about the Paul Fox cups is they could accommodate a lacrosse ball. Now, lacrosse balls vary a lot in size these days. This just falls right in there. Look at that. That's a perfect fit. And it just sits right there on top of it. You can move it around on the table with no friction or anything. And that's perfect. What he had done was he took this point here and he measured it to make it the same as the diameter, and he made this part a cylinder that came up to there, and then he blended it into a kind of a dome with a dent at the top. And he designed it a little differently. He brought the cylinder up to this point, and then it comes over. And that's the way that most of the modern ones are like. Now this still holds the lacrosse ball just fine, but that was the first thing that I noticed was that gentle dome, and then there's a very tiny flat spot on the top of each one of these. Be warned, that tiny flat spot also shows up in some of the cups that Magic Makers made that were very bad clones of the Paul Fox cups. So there you have a lesson in cup identification. And by the way, if you have cups you want identified, you can always mail me a photo. If you go to the Cups and Balls Museum site, you'll notice that all the pictures are in very sharp focus, but they're very small. And the way that happens, and I don't mind helping people identify things that they've acquired here and there.
Speaking of identification there, Bill, forgive me interrupting. Speaking of identification, there is a great difference that you've just explained between, shall we say, the engineering, in parenthesis, structure of the Paul Fox and the ones right now on your table. Presumably, like all props in Magic, each one has a different purpose, and in this instance, depending on the load. Would that be an accurate assumption on my part?
Pretty close, but actually I think it had more to do with the spinning process itself. It's all a matter of the philosophy of the cups. You're right to that degree. Now I have a set of Paul Fox chick cups here, but they're barely recognizable except to people who are buskers. And then once you see what they are, you'll go, aha, of course. Don't everybody answer at once. Whose cups were these? The answer is Gary Osborne, also known as Gazzo. You should be familiar with his book, The Art of Crowd Keeping, in which he describes his routine. And you see these battered cups, not just a set of battered cups, these battered cups on the table. And in there is a story. He was working in Key West. At one point in his routine, he handed one of the cups to a biker, and he said, "Look in the cup." He says, "Is there anything in the cup?" And he says, "No, there's nothing in the cup." He says, "Wrong, there's air in the cup." And the guy says, "There sure is." And he goes, sends the thing out on a forward pass that would have gone into the record books, and it landed in the middle of the ocean. Gazzo didn't know what to do. He folded up his tent, basically, walked over to the bar, and he was crying in his beer, literally. The bartender said, "Gazzo, what happened?" This biker threw my cup into the sea. It was impossible to replace these because Danny Dew basically quit making cups at that time. This fellow at the end of the bar says, "Do you know where he threw it?" He says, "Just a minute, I'll get my scuba gear." He ran out to his truck, got his scuba gear, put it on, and Gazzo pointed out to it. And I don't know which one of these cups it was, but one of these three cups has been out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, right off the Cuba. So there you go. The fun thing about this is the first time I saw these cups was in 1994 at Scarborough Fair. And so I knew that Gazzo did cups and balls. I introduced myself to him and I said, "I understand that you are a pretty darn good cups and balls man." He says, "Well, not so much anymore. I had a stroke." Went backstage at one of the stages I worked, and behind closed doors he puts on this jabossiere, which he made, by the way. He brings out these cups, and he performs the cups and balls for me. That is a historical thing. I've known these cups almost as long as I've known Gazzo.
I'd love to hear the anecdote about you and Slidini.
Slidini was at one of the World Magic seminars, and so he taught us the hand ping chin move, and he did the whole thing. You know, he would show us how to display the coins and how to do this, and then pick them up, and then you do the other thing, and so forth. So, you know, he comes by and sees how I'm doing. He says, "That's a nice." I said, "It's just so beautiful. Sometimes I'm a fool of myself." And gave me this terrible glare. And then he realized it was funny, and he laughed. So we left the classroom, and he came up to me and says, "You, the big guy, what, can you help me? I have to find the restroom." I said, "Sure." So I got up in front of him. I said, "All right, everybody make way for Mr. Slidini. Come on, everybody make way for Mr. Slidini." And I just basically parted the crowd like Moses. I got him over to the restroom. But that was it. I always liked him because he was not only a very sensible magician, he was very sensitive to audiences, and very sensitive to the way people responded without being touchy. A nice man, he really was. And the things he did for some of the people that you and I both know, like, for instance, he basically raised Cellini when Cellini was another orphan kid. And when I visited Cellini and Marianne in Switzerland a few years ago, Cellini told me some wonderful stories about Slidini.
Oh, Cellini was, I'm glad you brought him up. Well, sadly, he's gone now, because his number one student, which some people will know, is Eric Evans. Because Cellini, most people who are watching us will know who he is. And of course, Eric, who wrote his wonderful book. Again, another great busker.
Now, these are a set of Joe Porper cups. Oh, by the way, for those of you who are not familiar with the cups and balls, there's an extra ball. Shh, don't tell your mother. Okay, Joe Porper made this box. So everything fits into it just perfectly. Cups, the balls, the wand, which takes down, and the lid of the box has one of those Divernon spinning coins inlaid in the top. I'll bring it up toward the camera so you can kind of get a look at it. Probably better, yeah.
Yeah, that's better.
That's it. And these, I got this at Potter Auction. The strangest cups I think that I've got are probably these. Now, this is a set of cups that are valuable mainly for what they represent more than for the cups themselves. And they were made by a fellow named Colin Rose. Carter get pieces of HMS Victory to carve up. Well, the way it works is this. Ever so often, they have a crew of people go down into the innards of the HMS Victory and look for wood that has damage to it. And they cut out those timbers and they replace them with new timbers of the same type of oak. This set is unusual because it has a wand that is made also from the same oak. The ends are covered with tips made of copper. The hallmark is what they call a crow's foot, which represents the fact that the ship is the property of the king. I got those 15 years ago at the Magic Circle Centenary.
Speaking of the Magic Circle and belonging to the king who never did them, well, he's not quite a king, but Prince Charles, when he joined the Magic Circle many, many, many moons ago, for his entrance exam, actually did the cups and balls. And he got a magic bug from his great uncle, Lord Mountbatten.
That's correct. Those cups are in the Magic Circle Museum right now. These cups here are kind of interesting because you think of them as being absolutely of no value whatsoever. But if you remember the name John Ramsay, this was his last set of practice cups that were donated to the museum by Andrew Galloway, who was his biographer and student.
Sorry about the connection, folks, but we have some gremlins.
I wanted to show you a few more things. Those we were talking about ancient cups. These probably never got used for cups and balls. Now, these are not originals. These are the Vaffio cups from Mycenae, from about, I think, maybe 800 BCE. Originally, the real ones are made of gold, and they're in the Archaeological Museum of Antiquities in Athens. But they're pretty, and I have two or three. They sell these in the tourist stands in Greece. If you see these on eBay and they're asking you $200 or $300 for them, unless they're made of sterling silver, don't buy them, because you can pick them up for about $15 in Greece. These are actually modern versions of the French magic set cups that everybody sees. The French cups have a very sharp edge at the top. These were made by Wim Harrison, who is the village tinner on Etsy.
What are they made out of, Bill?
Excuse me. Made out of tin.
Tin? Oh, okay. Yeah. They are really tin cups. Okay.
They really are. A lot more complex than they appear to be. Speaking of the Paul Fox cups. Now, Vernon used Paul Fox cups when he when he did all this stuff. Then Fred Starkey, I believe it was, took a mold of the cups that Vernon was using with him to Persia when he was a correspondent, and he had a Persian metalsmith make 2 sets of engraved cups for Vernon. They looked very much like Paul's cups. And everybody wanted Paul Fox cups once they learned that that's what Vernon was using, you know. Well, when Vernon did his tour for Harry Stanley back in, I think it was 1952 or so, someone said, you need to have some cups made like Vernon's. So Harry just took a glance at the photograph, and he had somebody, probably Bertini, make this style of cup, which doesn't look at all like a Paul Fox cup. And in fact, it has a bigger load area. A Paul Fox cup will take a lacrosse ball, but a Harry Stanley cup will take a baseball. And that's a big cup. There was some great confusion over these. These were not bad cups. They're kind of lightweight. They've got engraving on them that's hard to see. But then Joe Porper decided to revive the version of cups, and he made the Porper cups, which, look at that. And look at this. And look at this. That's the test. These cups suddenly took off a couple of years ago, and people were buying them like crazy. Something strange happened. A guy in England named Brett Sherwood came up with something that was the next step. These are the Sherwood cups. Now these are about the same size as the Harry Stanley cups. They have a little different kind of a platform to them. These are engraved. They come in engraved, plain, and all. These are actual sterling silver. They will hold a tennis ball with no difficulty at all. This is the Cadillac of cups. Definitely among the best cups that have ever been made. These are a set of cups that belonged to a fellow named J. Elder Blackledge. He was a society magician around the time of between the First and Second World Wars. He performed many times for President Roosevelt. So it's a chance that he may have passed these to President Roosevelt for examination. I'd like to think that maybe a little bit of Franklin Roosevelt's DNA got off on these. These are cups, and if you just took a glance at them, you say, oh, those are Johnson cups. They look wrong. They do have Johnson Products, the logo inside them. But they're copper, because everybody knows that Johnson Products didn't make copper cups. Yeah, they did. They made a run of 53 sets, I believe. I managed to get 1 set from him. They're pretty rare. What makes a set of cups desirable? That's easy. You want it. What makes a set of cups collectible? That's even easier. Other guys want it.
8 ways so far. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm fascinated by this. I knew I would be. What a collection. And how about those cups going back to 4,000 or 5,000 years ago? And some way back before AD, and the cups that belonged to wasn't that Gazzo's story really amazing? You know, a guy picks up a big biker picks it up and throws it in the ocean, and then there's a scuba guy sitting at the end of the bar. Oh, you can't make this stuff up, can you? He goes there to get it and brings it back. Well, I don't know if any of you have some questions kind of prepared, because we could ask Bill. I don't know if he's got to his chop cups yet.
If you were going to buy a set of cups as an investment, which one would you get? I said, buy the one in a gold box. Throw the cups away and keep the box. I love the cups and balls, even though you don't see me doing a 3-cup routine. I do love the cups and balls. One of the first sets of cups that I bought from Alki was a set of cups that he said, I have a set of cups that I want to sell, but it's going to be very expensive, and it weighs 13 pounds for the set. And I don't know what to call it. I said, how big are they? He said, they will hold a 5-inch load ball. This is them.
Grief.
These are the monster cups. I named them for him because he didn't have a name. He says, Monster Cups. I love that name. Oh, look at that.
Now that just said, yeah.
If you take that and reduce it, It looks the same. It's because he uses the same algorithm for that. He did make a Jumbo Plus that I picked up at the Austin auction. This belonged to a fellow named Alan Bovick. This probably weighs about maybe 8 pounds for the set. So are there any questions that you'd like me to answer, Tony?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, in fact, those monster cups, you could do one heck of a routine, you know, instead of loading it with bowls, you load it with other cups and then bowls under the other cups. Yeah, I have a question for you. I just wondered if you'd manage to have enough time to maybe get out some of your little chop cups, particularly the tiny ones.
Jim Reiser came out with a set that is very, very small. He made these cups. Now I'm going to bring one of them up toward the camera so you can see them. I'm not just messing with your head here. These are little tiny cups.
Good grief. They look like thimbles almost. Yeah?
Try it again. These are about 3/8 inch in diameter, and they're about, a little shorter than a half inch, about a centimeter tall. So I've mentioned it to Alki, and Alki said, well, you know, I could probably make a set of cups that are that size. So he came out with these, and these are just exactly like the Van Doken cups, only they're very small. They're just about as small as these others, a little bigger. So Alki said, well, that's not quite right. They need to be smaller. We call these the nano cups. These are the pico cups. See how tiny those are?
They're even smaller. Goodness.
Yes,
yeah.
They are. These. Now here's the pico cup, and here's the tiny trad, and oops, it is smaller. And then he came up with these. Now these are hard to see. You see, that's the glory of CNC machining. But here are the Femto cups. They're really hard to hold on to, but there's one of them. It's, let's say, 1/8 of an inch tall, and
1/8 of an inch.
1/8 of an inch tall.
Well, that's an actual cup, right?
That's what it is. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Well, we have one here from a gentleman, from Tom, that's all I can identify him as, who says, could Bill please discuss the importance of the busker's pouch, and does he use one? And
I can tell you a lot of things about the busker's pouch, because if you're a busker, you need one. And now the thing is that the Jibaseer, or the busker's pouch, is very handy for holding your cups, for holding the loads, as an intermediary position for the loads to go to the cups. It's very important. But the busker's pouch, it's as important as any sleight you'll ever learn. It's a very handy place to put things. But if you're going to use a busker's pouch, it's probably a good idea to use it all the way through your act.
Yeah, sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. We just have these are the gremlins that show up. Really, we're coming to that time. Apologies again for the gremlins, and huge thanks to Bill for taking the time. As I said, a really long-time friend, and I'm glad we mentioned another dear mutual friend of ours called Ralph Markham. Some of you who are, shall we say, batting in my age range may remember that dear Markham had in the linking ring a column for many, many, many years called the Table of My Memory. Because some of you may know me, have this column in the MUM called Magic Around the World, and we also have the International Assembly. This gentleman, incidentally, is called Magic Noor, and he's one of the people we wrote about from Morocco, and he designs cups and balls. Basically, I think now what we'd like to do is to just literally throw the floor open. Put your mics on and just ask Bill anything you want directly, real quick. Well, I'll just fill you in. I was talking earlier on about Magic Around the World. We now have a wonderful SAM International Assembly, which truly has people from different parts of the world: the Netherlands, Norway, Morocco, Brazil, and very shortly, hopefully South Africa, and various other points around the world. And we have that thanks to the help of all the wonderful people who helped me put that together. So if you're not part of the International Assembly, you can join. John Sturck tells me that you can join the International Assembly if you're an SAM member, and you can have more than one assembly on your membership card. The object of the International Assembly is to widen the scope. Truly is a worldwide organization, and I love the SAM. And for those who don't know me, I was very fortunate back in 2000 to be made an international deputy. And when I was in Singapore, the president at the time, our good friend Mark Reedus, said, "Okay, they don't know what it means, so use international envoys." So I've used that ever since. Now, Mr. Palmer is back, so please unmute your mic and speak with him directly.
When I was a kid, I worked with Dennis Loomis. I traveled on the road with him for a year when I was 16 till I was 17. We went to Alaska, British Columbia. He was famous for his mini chop cup. And I'm curious if you have one.
I'm very much aware of it. Actually, it was a very interesting cup. I got hold of several different versions of it. There was originally Rings and Things manufactured the little chop cup for him. And then Rings and Things went out of business. And Jim Reiser started making the miniature chop cups and the pocket flask and all the other accoutrements that went with it. And it was put out in several different versions. There was a collector's version that had a case and all that. I've got, I think, each iteration of it. Back when I was working the Renaissance Festival, I decided I wanted to do a dollhouse, and I had built one using the Berling hull plans. But when I saw Dennis's idea, I asked him if I purchased the plans from him, if I could build his top on a Berling hull base so I could have it right on the ground. And he gave me permission to do so. And then when he came out with his DVD on that particular illusion, he asked me to send pictures of it, and I accommodated him, of course. I later sold that particular dollhouse. The cool thing about that dollhouse is you could look straight into it. You had no idea.
I actually knew the designer of the paint job on that dollhouse, and Dennis took a lot of pride in the perspective painting, where they would make the lines closer and closer together as it got back. So as you looked it had perspective painting. I do have that copy of that DVD on that dollhouse. I use that dollhouse, Dennis's dollhouse. We used it every night in the show, so I'm very familiar with that prop.
Oh yeah, well I used it
40 years ago.
I used it every day at the Renaissance Festival for many years. It was the way that I produced my assistant for the rest of the day.
Forgive me, Bill, interrupting. Speaking of your Renaissance days, Tom has actually sent us a message saying, and I quote, "I actually have a set of cups that Bill Palmer actually made out of clay." And then he asks, did Bill perform the cups and balls at the Texas Renaissance Festival every show? And if so, what restrictions were there?
I did not perform the chop cup on every show. I was playing something like the T.H. White Merlin, who lived backwards in time.
We're having again our gremlins. Apologies for that, but
as far as finding that particular cup, though, to get back to the original question, they're hard to find now.
Anthony, it's Rod Chow. I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, thanks, Bill, for sharing your collection. It's incredible. It's beautiful. Everything is so exquisite. Is there an idea of how large your collection is in terms of numbers of sets and numbers of sets of balls and final loads? Like how huge is your collection?
Well, it barely fits into a 20 by 24 foot room, and it's close to 2,000 sets of cups, and each set of cups has the balls and loads that belong with it. So just do the math. That's all I can say. I've got Larry Jennings' chop cup that he performed the routine in Genie. I've got that with all the props and everything. And I've got the one of the chop cups that Paul Daniels used on television.
Just very quickly, if I can, as part of my job, if people have not heard of Paul Daniels, it's unlikely, but it could be some people who have never heard of him. He's gone now, respect and RIP to him. He was the most famous magician in England and in other places in Europe. He did go to the US at one time, but it was not as successful as perhaps it could have been. But Paul had an amazing run of shows on the BBC in England, and he really did become a household word.
I got that when I got that chop cup. I sent him a photograph of it, and I said, "Is this the cup you used on television?" And he sent me an email back and said, "Yes, it is." And I said, "Come visit my collection." And I told him how to get onto the website. And he didn't do it for a while. Then all of a sudden, I get this message on Facebook. It says, "Visited your collection. Good job." And that was it. But that was enough. Now, for those of you who have not seen the collection, www.cupsandballsmuseum.com.
Anybody else have anything before we kind of wrap it up?
Well, I'd like to just say thank you for inviting me here today. I have enjoyed the show immensely. And Bill, thank you for taking the time out of your day to show us all the amazing props and things that you've collected. And the stories are probably better than ever because you have the props and the stories together. So thank you very much.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. I will echo that, and I will tell you the gentleman who was just speaking was called Tim Wise, and I met him when Jeff invited me to be amongst the performers on the bill at the Wonderground, and Tim was the immaculate sartorial MC and a really delightful man, and we kind of kept in touch. But I want to say on camera, so he can't get away, that I will bring him on as a guest on the Darkstone Dossiers. We have a lot to talk about, particularly one of the most amazing things I've heard in the conversation I had with him earlier today, and that is Abra, ABRA.TV. If you can't wait, get in touch with Tim or go find Abra TV. Trust me, it's worth doing. Speaking of guests, a couple of weeks from today, I have the remarkable Mark Paul, again, someone you may not have heard of, but if you go to YouTube and Google Michael Parkinson, Mark Paul, that's M-A-R-C, and then Paul, one of them will come up, Michael Parkinson being the equivalent to Johnny Carson in England. This was on the BBC some years ago. It is on YouTube. Pull up the one where Mark Paul has got Michael Parkinson has also got a couple of actors, and Tom Jones, the singer. And Mark is the only one in the world who does any card at any number, exactly how the legendary Mr. David Burglass, OBE, does it. Why does Mark do it? Because David has only given Mark the real secret to his original ACAN. That's the reason Mark does it. Nobody else. Thank you for showing up. It's a pleasure to have you all here. Huge thanks to Joel, and this time I will use his middle name, Batman Zaritsky. He's our incoming SAM president, if you didn't catch us at the beginning. Love you, Bill. Thank you so very much, Bill. And to Julie.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Bill.
Great show. Thank you. Great show.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Bill, thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Julie, and everybody else.
Bravo, everyone.
Most welcome. Thank you so much. Take care. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you.